welcome to Dear Katie, the podcast that amplifies courageous voices and real stories of resilience, healing, and hope after trauma. Inspired by the many letters Katie has received over the last 20 years, each week she interviews survivors, healers, and experts to honor their stories and explore the many paths to healing and hope. Before we begin, please know, many episodes of Dear Katie cover sensitive topics related to sexual violence, trauma, and recovery. Listen with care and take the space you need to take care of yourself. Your well-being is what matters most. Now, let's join Katie and today's guest for a conversation that matters.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dear Katie podcast. As you know, I am Katie Koestner and along for this great journey. Those of you who've been following along with all the episodes, I think the journal must be getting thick by now with the survivors, the activists, the advocates, all the different people. And today is going to be just a plethora of amazing stories, narratives, history, future action, all the good stuff. And you are going to be so delighted to meet Don McPherson. I'm going to let Don tell you who he is. I know him not ever meeting on the same stage, but we literally have bopped around the whole country and probably the globe alongside one of each other in spirit. So you are all in for a treat. Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Katie. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah. So you grew up online. So I guess for our listeners, Don and I are relatively within the same age group. I'll say within 7 years or so.
Yep.
And so Don came along just before me, but then in life, in birth, I believe, and then came into the movement just right after I was starting to do the work and had been on the cover of Time. So maybe we'll just start a little bit about, like, of course, people know you to play football. So how did that begin for you?
Yeah, so, I grew up on Long Island, in a little area of Long Island called Lakeview, which was a very diverse neighborhood. By the time I reached high school, it was mostly an African-American neighborhood. My father was a New York City police officer. He was a detective. My mother was my school nurse in middle school, which was horrific.
Oh, gosh.
To have your mom in middle school of all levels.
Especially the nurse. She knows everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And she knows everybody, and I got in trouble every day because I'm a talker, right? So I got in trouble for talking in class and got sent to my mother's office many times. I'm the youngest of five. So 2 brothers, 2 sisters. Both of my whole family was actually pretty popular in the neighborhood where I grew up. Everyone knew my grandmother's dog. She lived on a really popular corner was the way to get to school, the back way to get to school. And my oldest brother played football as well. He went on to play professionally with the San Diego Chargers. He now runs a church in San Diego. My other brother was a professional boxer, was ranked 2nd in the world as a boxer. And so I came up behind these 2 male athletes as a very young kid, and I was afraid to play. I kind of chickened out my first couple of years of playing. And then got good, found my legs, and transferred to another high school away from my family. So I was really very independent. And then went to Syracuse University on a football scholarship, had a fairly successful career there. As you can see some of the things behind me, a member of the College Football Hall of Fame, and all kinds of fun stuff happened while I was at Syracuse.
And you were a quarterback.
I was a quarterback.
Yeah.
Yes. And I was high school All-American athlete in 2 sports, football and track, and then an All-American athlete, All-American quarterback at Syracuse. Won all the awards. I was 2nd with the Heisman. I was, it's interesting because it was really before, just as ESPN was emerging as a network. So we sort of talk about our age and the timing of it.
Right.
And, I wasn't a really, really big star by today's standards, but I was just big enough that I was well known and benefited from the emerging business of sports. And I hated it. I hated that part of the sport, but it did allow me what was starting to become a part of my interest was the ability to talk about social issues.
And since I wanted us to talk together, so, as I was listening, I'm thinking about a really important part of what has enabled both of us to do the work. And it's credentials, believability, and you're really good at something. So if you're really, I always tell all my activist wannabes, you need straight A's. Like, you don't get to say I was out protesting and so I got a C or a D. You have to be perfect. You have to do all the stuff for all the people to take you seriously enough to listen. So I kind of, now I'm getting more of it, because then you have at least the doors open and people let you walk in, right?
And I think the other thing, Katie, that I've always known about you is not only does your story need to be authentic, but you need to be authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that I know you've always projected in, and it is that this is me. This is unapologetically me.
Yeah.
And I spoke at a school recently, and I never know sometimes when I walk on stage what I'm going to say. I know what I'm going to get to. I don't know how it's going to start off very often, and it's really how the moment hits me. And I stood there and I told these students this moment of my life was probably one of the lowest moments, not really that low, but relatively speaking in my sports career, is when it was over. And when I had nothing left in that sport. And who was I without the sport? And it was a very sort of real moment. And it was me just kind of being cathartic in the moment. I think that's when people really connect with you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So you're at Syracuse, and you're still, and then you go professional, right?
Yes.
And
so I got drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles. It's interesting because
wait, before we get to pro ball,
yes,
I'm a Syracuse ball. So here, let's just go parallel. So when you and I also have gone and spoken with sports teams at colleges, we'll start with the colleges. I'm sure you have had this, but I've been brought in, by the Sooners, or I've been brought in by University of Miami, just the football program, or just the basketball. I'm like, one team, 15 humans wants my time. Some of the coaches are all in, and I'm always sitting there thinking, how can I relate to this group when I don't have anything in common. But then you go back to authenticity and shared human experience. But did you ever find, when you've been able to talk to student athletes at the college level, that they were more receptive, or did that at least get their ears listening and their phones down and their hats off, and this, instead of this one, they're sitting up, you know what I mean? All the body moves. Did that?
It's interesting about that. Yes, and the fact that I was a student athlete, I always say it gives me the first 5 minutes free.
Yeah,
right?
that's
right. First 5 minutes to do whatever I want to do, and toy around and not mess up. I get those 5 minutes free, and then I better have something important to say. And it's what's interesting. What you just said is I've gone to places. Maybe a little bit different than you going into a locker room, because that's kind of that's my people, right? It's my home base. Where I spent most of my life. But I've been to places. I think about going to places like Ulysses, Kansas, or Liberal, Kansas, or going to these small Minot, North Dakota.
Oh my gosh,
where I am.
Yeah, I've been there. It's really cold, even in the
exactly. Summer. That's right. The places that you end up going. And it's the same thing. It's like, what am I've had that exact thought that you expressed. What can I possibly say to these people that's going to resonate? And then that's when you really have to rely on your authenticity and the strength of what you have to say, and being very real with them, because no one wants to see someone come into the town and lie to them, or tell them something that's not accurate and sincere.
But I would add one nuance too as well, Don, because I think what's cool is we have captive audiences. They're required to attend. How unique is it where you now in this day and age get a whole hour of unfiltered time?
Yes.
Human in real
face to face time, right? Not exactly face to face time.
It's a rare air we are breathing. Yeah.
I draw on. That's the moment that I draw on sort of I don't want to say toughness, but sort of the no nonsense coaches that I was raised with in sport. And I would always say, I remember saying this so many times to athletes. All right, listen, if you have to be here, let's make the most of it, right? Don't waste the hour. Let's really dig in. Call me out on something if you want to call me out, but don't waste the hour. If you have to be here, let's make the most of it.
Yeah. And the flip side of that, Don, the line for me was I'll be in the middle of sharing this story of the worst night, right? And then I'll lose somebody in the room and it still is crushing. And so instead of say the most of it, I'll just say, wow, I am so sorry I'm wasting your time. Like, this is the story of the worst night of my life. And I can tell it's not clicking with you. And I definitely need all the people in this room just to hear me. And it's really hard for me to talk when you're not listening. Like, it's like such a guilt trip, but it's how I'm feeling. I'm like, oh my God, I'm devastated. And it's not because I'm greedy for them to even believe me. It's just, can you hear me? Right?
Right.
Yeah. But okay, wait, we went too fast. So go back, Syracuse. So I was just thinking I'll call this your before self. Like, this is your before self. So then you're playing football at Syracuse and you're raised in this culture. And I know in some of your talks, you've alluded to like going back and rethinking the word choices and the like bullying and the like casual use of misogyny that was thrown around. Like, people I think who aren't in the locker room with people like you at either the college or the professional level, it's a mystery. Like, is it really that bad? Are there really jock straps being thrown around with jokes? Like, are there really like, sex, like who's got how many? And I guess, is that still the case? Was it the case? Do you hear from the guys it's still the case? Like, what's your feed and take on past self when you weren't paying attention, and then what you're hearing?
I think it's overly exaggerated.
Okay.
And I think it's exaggerated because it's romanticized. It's romanticized by men, mostly men who aren't in the locker room, who it's like they want that space where they can say whatever they want to say and sort of have that masculine bravado. And they think that in that because it's really, the locker room is one of the last all male environments, right?
Yeah.
So all the other places where women have.
Except I found out, Don, there's still like country clubs with men's only smoking rooms. Like, hello.
Yes.
I think.
Well, there are still country clubs that only allow women to play on Tuesday between 1 and 3, right? I mean, it's still there. That's still a thing. It's still there.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's why the locker room becomes this euphemism for the all male environment, because it really is, right? I mean, I remember when I think it was a New England Patriots player who was in the locker room, and I'm trying to think of the reporter's name, but a woman walked in, and he's like, I'm not putting clothes on because there's a woman in the locker room. It was this big controversial thing that all of a sudden a woman was in the locker room when men are getting changed, right? And so there's an exaggeration of it. The reality is, I remember the locker room. It was a place of physical pain. You limped in, you limped out. You beat each other up on the field and in practice and in games. You talked about the game. You talked about the stresses of why you were in that locker room. Now, there is downtime, but that downtime is no different than downtime in a corporate boardroom, or downtime when men start to talk about whatever they gather and talk about to make themselves feel good.
Thanks for clearing the air there.
Yeah, it kind of, as someone who's been in all sorts of different environments, I tend to be kind to those that get over exaggerated, because it allows other men off the hook, as if it's happening there and it's not happening in other workplaces and other spaces, which we know it is. And so, but my experience also was, as an athlete, as I said a moment ago, I wasn't into sort of the bravado of it, and I was kind of very independent and sort of aloof, which is an odd quality for a quarterback who is supposed to be sort of in charge of things. And so I was always kind of a little distant from my teammates. I was a bit of a loner, even though I was a leader. But that I felt like, and this is important to the work I do now, to have that sort of distance from the crowd, to not be influenced by the crowd, was very important to me. And it was more around alcohol and other behaviors that I didn't want to engage in. So I distanced myself, and I took on a persona that I was very much crafted. I started wearing a shirt and tie when I was in high school to school. And then when I got to college, I maintained that. And was just, I used to wear my grandfather's fedora. I would walk around with a cigar. I wanted to be an old man, basically, because I felt safety in that.
Yeah.
I didn't have to be young and cool and hip, because I wasn't. So there was a safety in this projection of an older sort of distance from my peer group.
I think that
individual.
makes so much sense, Don, because definitely I would say I was a loner as well. And I didn't try to fit in. I just did a whole bunch of other stuff. And so
Right.
I always joked when people say about dating before all this, I was like, I had to import my boyfriends from other high schools because I was going to be the top of my class and I wasn't going to date a stupid boy. So I was like, I'm not going to date somebody less intelligent. So I'll just export the boyfriends and date them on my time on the weekends. But it was like I was pretty intense about everything else. And I do think that those two things we have gave us the strength and the, I guess, the ability to navigate the world alone.
Yes.
But anyway, so you're done. So I always think it's interesting. You still went and played pro ball for a while, right? How many?
7 years.
7. And then what happened? Why did that end? I don't know the story.
This is a story I told to a group of students just recently. I lost interest in playing, and it was no longer fun. I wasn't having fun. And there was a moment where while I was in college, I started working with a drunk driving prevention program here in New York State. And I kept working in schools while I was playing professionally. I brought a program from Long Island to Canada when I was playing in the Canadian Football League. And so I was very interested in working with young people. And there was this one moment where I was talking to a group of 5th graders, 10-year-old boys, and there were 10-year-old girls as well. But the boys started asking me how much money I made, what kind of car I drove. And they had, once again, had this fantasized vision of what a professional athlete was. And they started with a salary. And Katie, this goes back years before people were making millions of dollars.
Right.
And they started with millions and millions of dollars. And by the time they got down to like $2 million, which was not close to what I was making in the Canadian Football League, they kind of like wrote me off, like I didn't matter anymore.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, and what broke my heart was not about me. It was about what they thought of what that role, that position of a professional athlete meant. I had dedicated not just most of my life, but most of my days, hours and hours to being in that competitive space, and for them to just go, because you're not making the money, none of those things matter. And I felt sad for them. And then when I went back to that next season, I looked around and said, what is this? What's the purpose of all this for me? If I'm not, as I said a little while ago, if I'm not able to use this platform to reach young people, then what is this that I'm a part of?
Interesting.
Because that became more important to me than playing football.
That's awesome. Nobody does that, Don. Nobody gives up. There's not many stories that have that trajectory where you have, what's lauded as fabulous lifestyle, and then you say, I don't want the jet, right?
And
I don't want the caviar.
Yes, and because it was no longer serving me, it no longer had a purpose, and so I was like, all right, then what am I really doing here?
So then you give that up, and what did you have a plan? Did you go cold turkey?
So it's funny. I decided I was going to retire. I was playing in Hamilton, Ontario, in the Canadian Football League. Decided I was going to retire. I spent 3 years in the NFL, 3 years in Canada at the time. totally got rid of. I had a house in New Jersey when I was playing for the Eagles. I bought a house down there. I had an apartment in Canada. I got rid of all my, stuff, all my stuff that was scattered around, the Northeast. And then decided I was going to go back to Long Island, work in this community program I'd been working with called Athletes Helping Athletes, and doing programs in schools with high school and elementary school kids. And then I got a call from the new owner of a team in Ottawa in Canada. And he said, we want you to be the guy. We want to fly you up here. We want to, you to be the quarterback of the team. And so I went, and I decided, after long consultation with the new coach, okay, I'll come. I'll do it. But I really didn't want to do it. I really just wanted to get that last year out. And it was in the middle of training camp, the very beginning of the summer, that I realized I didn't want to be there. And then they had to cut me, and they had to tell me, we're not paying you what we said we were going to pay you. We're going to let you go, and you need to go home.
Wow.
And I had to make a decision, and I sat in this office with the owner, the general manager, and the head coach. These three men who never come together to cut a player, but they had invested in me and decided they were going to at least give me that dignity to let me know. And I cried in front of them. And I didn't cry because it was over. I cried because I didn't know who I truly was without football. And I finally had to face it. And I took the league minimum that they wanted to give me. And I just kind of hung around and practiced and wasn't very serious about it. And in the middle of that season, I got a phone call from Richard Lapchick, who I met earlier that spring, talking about having a plan. He was at Northeastern University at the Center for the Study of Sport and Society, where Jackson Katz had just created the Mentors in Violence Prevention program. And Richard called me in the middle of that season and said, hey, we've got this program, an AmeriCorps-funded program called Athletes in Service to America. Would you consider interviewing for the job? And I did. And I got the job in the middle of my last season. I'll never forget. I was in a restaurant with a bunch of my teammates. We had dinner, guys hanging out at the bar, and I went to my car because I had a cell phone in my car. This is before
fancy.
I went to my cell phone in my car and called Richard Lapchick from my car, and he said, we'd like to offer you the job. And I went back into the restaurant and told my teammates, I'm done. I'll finish the season with you guys, but I'm done. I'm taking a job in Boston. And so I always tell people my transition out of football was the 7-hour drive from Ottawa to Boston when I went to work at Northeastern.
Okay, so now you're at Northeastern and you meet Jackson, but were you in the same department or just ran into each other? Or
So yes, the Center for the Study of Sport and Society was created by Richard Lapchick, whose father was the first head coach and general manager of the New York Knicks. His father, Joe Lapchick, signed the first black player in the NBA in 1950. And Richard Lapchick, a little boy, watched his dad go through all the issues around racism in sport, dedicated his life to that issue. As I said, when I met him early in 1994, he'd just come back from Nelson Mandela's inauguration because of his work in the anti-apartheid movement. And so I went to work with this white man doing work around racism in sport because that was my issue, right? I was a black quarterback. That was my issue. And the program that they had developed, Athletes in Service to America, was a national program that was taking elements of what they were doing in Boston, one of which was Jackson's MVP program. So my job was to learn from Jackson, take portions of his program and deliver it to Buffalo, Reno, Nevada, Austin, Texas, and Lexington, Kentucky, where we had satellite sites with different college campuses. And so I had to learn from Jackson. I had to learn what his program was. So I spent hours, and if you know Jackson, he can go, right? He's got like so much information in his head, and he was just mind dumping information around misogyny and sexism and the entire issue of men's violence against women, to philosophy, to approach, history, all of it, and just it was a complete, incredible time I literally stepped out of a locker room into that environment. And I had one of the more brilliant men on issues of masculinity and men's violence against women in the world just dumping information on me, and so much of it, not just did I identify with intellectually, but going back to the locker room, I saw the environment that I stepped away from so clearly. because I saw it through the lens of the rules around masculinity, the rules around how men engage with each other, how we maintain misogyny, how we maintain sexism in some in really formal ways. And when I say really formal ways, in the ways in which we approached sports, was done in those ways, the ways in which we looked at the violence of sports, whether we looked at I actually argued that I never believed that football was violent. And so when I got to Northeastern and here I was running a violence prevention program, and someone said, well, you played the most violent sport. I'm like, there's nothing violent about football. To me, it was strategy and positioning and all that. And then you start to look at it when you step back and see things differently. And so I jumped into this incredible environment where I was learning from, and at the time in Boston, Carol Gilligan and Nan Stein and all these feminist scholars and others who were doing the work. They were just there. It was just an amazing time at that time to be in Boston in higher ed around these issues.
Yeah, so you soaked it all in and you're learning how to go and deliver in front of students. But those are ready-made opportunities, more or less, right? When you're going and they know you're coming and you have a banner that you've got going. Right. I guess, how did you make the jump from there to just decide, I have my own lane, I want to do it myself?
So we were doing the MVP and delivering MVP in those different places, and here's sort of the historical arc. So that was 1994. The other thing that happened in 1994 was I call it the summer of OJ, and it was the summer of the OJ trial and all the attention around issues of men's violence against women and sport.
Yeah, let's talk about that together for a second. So for listeners, my Time magazine was 91. And If y'all look back at that one, on the inside cover, we have William Kennedy Smith and Mike Tyson. Yes. Back, we have the early part of like, oh my gosh, these are real humans. I'm like the least famous nobody 18-year-old kid. But then there's celebrities getting called out. And then in 94, Dawn, while that's happening, there was the rally on Capitol Hill with 250,000 people for Nicole Brown Simpson. So I'm now 21 and at that rally on the stage as the youngest, and I wrote my speech on the subway in my head and got all fired up. So that's like, just imagine for our listeners, what's going on is all of a sudden there's mobilization and there's Take Back the Nights going on, which they had been going on, but they're definitely going on. And there's, protests. And then there's a few theorists, researchers in the ivory tower publishing more books and doing more of the formative numbers out there. Like, yes, we really have a problem. This is a real issue. And then we have legislative change going on. Like, I was testifying on Capitol Hill for the Sexual Assault Victims Bill of Rights, and we had the Clery Act. That was in 91 in March. And so all of that's going on. So just for our listeners, so Dawn and I he's in Boston. I'm on the Greyhound bus going around speaking while I'm a student in college.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, during any break, I even flew once, Dawn. I spoke at Stanford to a fraternity, a whole bunch of Greeks on a Sunday night. And I said, I'm only coming if I can get the red eye, so I make my 8 a.m. Monday morning class. And I took my chemistry book on the plane and studied the whole way out and back. And then to make it worse, the fraternity guys like, we're having exotic erotic tonight. I was like, what is that? And then they're like, we want you to come. And then I find out it's like pasties. And I'm like, I don't think it's a good look for the date rape speaker to wear pasties to exotic erotic later the same night.
Right.
Not a look I want.
Katie, you're speaking about the moment that I am very, very honest about is that, when we talk about privilege, The first chapter of my book is titled Black Man with Privilege, because people say, oh, you're Black and you're a marginalized identity and blah, blah, blah. I didn't come to this work as a survivor, nor did I come to this work as a perpetrator who was mandated. I learned about it. I was like, whoa, my silence has been the problem. And your path to that moment of all that stuff that you were enduring and dealing with, and the Greyhound buses and the whatever that night is at Stanford, and the way that you literally had to fight at a time when people were denying that there was a problem. And I came in '94 when it was arguably. I tried to explain to people how famous O.J. Simpson was.
Huge.
And he was not just a Heisman Trophy winner. He was not just the all-time running back in the NFL at the time. He was also a Hollywood actor. He was a Black guy doing commercials and endorsements before that was even heard of.
Right.
It's what he was doing. Remember, Run OJ Run.
Beautiful blonde in a mansion.
Everyone knew him, and he crossed over in multiple genres of society. And so, for that moment in '94. When the murder occurred, and I have my own theory about that, which we can talk about another time, and then the subsequent car chase. I mean, it shut down national media. It shut down
every screen was the same.
And it's hard for young people today to understand how much that was. Like, we all grew up in the '70s with Walter Cronkite as the number one news source, right? And so there was a time when the world was fixed on one thing, and that's what was happening. And all of a sudden, as a former Black athlete, the conversation around Black men, Black athletes, and violence against women, because of Mike Tyson and OJ and a few others. I was on I was on the Phil Donahue show before I even understood this issue, because Donahue was covering this issue.
That makes total sense. You were a spokesperson.
And so I didn't.
Let's find someone. Who do we know?
Exactly.
Yeah, and they send you a plane ticket, and they think you have nothing else going on in all the world. Like every TV show, I swear to God, Don, they would send me stuff. It was like snail mail. Like, I would get paper, hand carried delivered tickets to fly to whatever show it was. And I'm like, I have to go to class. But they just assume you're going to want to be on every single darn show.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It was something, but I still got straight A's. I just, it was crazy. I loved it. I look back, and the harder it was, the more I love it. The more people hated me, the more I was like, I can do it. I was like, bring it on.
Wow.
Yeah, I loved it. But I think that's why I think it's so cool, because you're coming at it from also a token. Like, I became a token, and you're a token. You're like the go-to spokesperson when they need someone on. It is still that way today. Hello, dial up CNN. Who do we need? You're on the short list, but. Okay, so now you're starting to get media, but I still didn't hear, like, how did you carve out, like, the Don way of doing it?
So when I learned from Jackson about the issue, it's sort of really understanding masculinity and the social construct of masculinity, and obviously the link to men's violence against women, I really started to, and this goes back to the authentic piece. I started to think about my own experience, and when did I because here I am learning from Jackson about masculinity and what it means to be a man, and how we socially define that, and the detrimental ways in which that definition harms women's lives. And so I started to trace it, because I'm the son of a cop and a school nurse. My brother runs a church. He's a pastor of a church in San Diego. I came from a good family. We were good people, and intact family. I had a lot of privilege as a kid with the love around me, and so I was starting to look around and, like, where did I learn this? Because I hadn't learned it. I hadn't learned a healthy form of masculinity, and I was raised in a pretty healthy environment, and so I had to examine all the language, all the people, all my siblings and coaches and teachers and uncles, and I had to really examine and be honest about how I did not learn this wholeness of masculinity. And that's where the title of the book, of my book, was "You Throw Like a Girl," came from, because I started thinking about the worst insult you can you can say to a little boy is compare him to a girl in any way. And how early I learned misogyny, how early I learned it, and how ingrained it was in my entire experience
I
as
think
an
it's
athlete.
that's part's still going on, but I think, the throwdown now is also, you're gay. That I think it's just
Yeah.
expanded to otherness. Maybe we can talk about it in a second. Like, how do you disparage someone is call them someone other than a person with power, right? Or privilege.
It was, and that's, yes, exactly. It was to make it was, and it said that the insult, it was either insult, or in some ways it was considered an affirming. Don't be. Right. It was used to encourage,
Yeah.
but fundamentally it says that women and girls are less than. Right. You don't insult somebody by calling them something better than. Right. You insult them by assuming that in some ways, and so that's when the sexism and the misogyny comes out.
And were you doing all this introspection kind of in your own bubble? What is that operationalized like? Were you reading? Were you going to lectures? Were you just talking to people, talking to yourself?
All of the above.
Okay.
It was, I had Jackson on the one hand, and Byron Hurt, and some other amazing people around me in Boston. I was still in some ways involved in not in football per se, but I was doing professional football radio in Boston, because someone heard I was in town, and I got a job at WBZ covering NFL on weekends. And so I had one foot still in the sports world a little bit. I was doing this work, and I was going through my own sort of, introspection. Again, my life without football. What was I? Who was I? And then this examination around masculinity really started to open up. What I said before about working with young people, I started really recognizing how was I influencing young boys in who I was as a man, and what did I have to change? And obviously the first thing was that understanding of the power of that language that says that women and girls are less than, and also ask boys to live masculinity in a way that I consider to be very narrow.
Okay, and then I just imagine you writing, but you're constantly on the road speaking too?
Yes.
Yep. Mostly colleges or?
Everywhere. Colleges, small communities, small towns.
Military bases?
Pardon me?
Military bases?
Military bases.
Yeah.
A lot of military work. College campuses, a lot of community organizations. I joined the board of the Ms. Foundation for Women at one point, and a few different organizations, doing a lot of work with the NCAA. So a lot of consulting with colleges, and the association at the time was in Kansas City. They moved to Indianapolis. And because of all that work, was really starting to hone in on a very specific message. When I left Northeastern, I went back to Long Island, and I started something called the Sports Leadership Institute, and got reconnected with a high school and elementary school program that I'd been working with for years on Long Island. And that brought me back into proximity of very young kids, of elementary school students. And once again, watching the socialization going on with boys at that time really started to frame out the messaging.
Did you, as you're traveling, Don, I guess I'm trying to think, I don't know how you you didn't have an agent, you were just yourself, right?
No, I've never had an agent.
I'm like, I don't want anyone talking for me.
Exactly.
I want to know, I want to do everything. I want to know what you want, why you want me, what are we going to get accomplished? It's like, I'm a person, and I'm not like a paper doll you put me somewhere.
Right, exactly.
Like, don't pull the string, because you don't know what's going to come out. Like, right. I want to be fully present. That was something that was always critical to me.
I remember one time an agency called me and said, "Hey, we had a cancellation. Could you fill in for?" I can't remember who the speaker was. And I went to this organization in the Midwest, and I got there and did the whole thing. And they said, "Oh, we only have you for 15 minutes at this place and 10 minutes." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And And I'm driving back to the airport with the executive director. She's driving me back to the airport. And I said, do you mind if I ask you a question? Like, I know how much I got paid. How much did they charge you? And and she told me all this. And I'm like, listen, I will come back here for free to do the things that we didn't have time to do. Like, I had no time with her staff.
Yeah.
And here I was. I went to a donor's house and did 15 minutes at a donor's house with a bunch of wealthy folks who were, and I said, you didn't get the bang for your buck. Yeah. I will come back, and I did. I went back for free.
That's awesome.
They flew me out there, but I spent time with their staff talking about how do we engage more men, how do we do this work in a way that's at the cutting edge of where we are in trying to do prevention and promotion work, and I was the only time every now and then I've had an agent call me and say, hey, here's a job, but for the most part I do it myself, and I tell people all the time. You don't pay me per hour. You pay me to get on the plane. After that, I'm yours. Let's go to work. Let's get it done. Let's maximize the amount of time that I'm in your community.
Yeah. And I think it's really important for our listeners just to know, like, if you're inspired by, like, if you want this kind of crazy life where you're an activist, I think it's a word we said initially, authentic, but it's also, it's hard. It's like, you want to be a public speaker? I'm like, I didn't take a class on it. You just do it again and again and again, and you do it here and you do it there, and you see what happens, and you see what happens in Montana, and you're in the gym and you have a bullhorn and the power goes out and then the sprinklers come on, and then there's cows mooing and there's a fly in your face, and then you're like, oh my God, what do we do with those kids who are leaving for soccer practice right now? And then you go talk to more people. Like, I would just, one time, Don, I would go recruit my audiences because I was like, I'm going to figure out how to get them to go. And they didn't know who I was. Like, no picture of me ever looked like me. So I went to the, it was Texas A&M, and it was the Corps of Cadets. And I went up to the director, and he said, if you come running with us at 5 a.m., I'll get my guys to go. I'm like, okay, I'm there. So I went running. I did all the chants. I'm like, don't test me because I'm there. I can remember at Haverford College, I just went to the cafeteria at dinner, and I was going to speak like in 2 hours, and I would just go up to random all the guys. I'd be like, there's this amazing speaker tonight. And they're like, what are they talking about? I'm like, it's sex. It's about sex. It's about really good sex. I think you better come. And then sometimes they'd show up and they'd be like, I would sit in the audience with them until they introduced me.
I do that a lot as well. And I sit there and I ask students, like, do you know what this is about? Like, and now that I've got the gray hair and they know I'm the speaker.
They can guess.
They can guess, right? You don't look like you belong here.
I think that's what I love too, Don. Is like I think, what makes us look. We love it. We've been doing this 30 plus years, and I love it. It's just you have to go and want. You have to want to do the hardest. As another thing about agents, like, I was going to ask you, like, I want to go where no one's gone. Like, if no one's ever had a sexual assault speaker at that school, that's where I want to go. How do I get in? Do I need to convert? Like, what do I? And I've been where women can't stand at the pulpit, or, like, I've spoken at one time. This was so funny, Dawn. I'll tell you this, and then you've got to tell me some stories. My Time magazine cover makes me look like light skin black. Like, some people are like, oh. And so back then there was no media, like no one, people saw that thing, but it was a historically black college in Alabama, and I got off the plane and they picked me up, and they were like looking around, and I saw my name on the sign, and I walked up to them, and their face like, oh no. I was like, it's okay. It's going to be great. And it was booked for the chapel. Like, it was required for every student. And then they tried to hide me. I'm like, I'm going to watch. They put me in this. There was one white woman who worked there, one in admissions, and they found her. And they were like, you can talk. She's going to show you around. It was so awkward and so embarrassing for everyone. I was super excited. I had no judgment in my world. Like I love everything. Show me more stuff. Give me, I want to see everything. And so finally I showed up, like they pulled the curtain aside and there I walk up and it was like the whole audience was stunned. So and then plus the topic, it's like, I'm not even a juggler. I'm not here to yodel. Like,
Right.
I'm not even cool. I'm here talking about sexual assault.
Right.
And so my life, I don't know. So I was curious, like, have you ever had those moments? And I probably chose them, right? Like, I'm like, yes, I want to go everywhere. And I wanted to. I was like, if it doesn't pay, I don't care. Can I get there? Because and I was like, and the other thing, and then I want you to respond. The other thing I always believed was the communities that need the most, where the people who start to have a shape shift, then they leave, they get burnt out. And they leave their community, and then no one's left to say anything else. So I'm like, don't leave. You've got to stick it out. Be patient. Like, the agents of change can't all just congregate in Boston.
Right. Exactly.
Like you got to go find more places. The problems are everywhere. Go find them.
That's right.
Yeah. Yes. So anyway, what are some of the things like along your road that were just, hard or crazy?
As a result of the time that it was, and there was some high profile events, I found myself in the middle of them. So I found myself in the middle of what was going on at the University of Colorado at one point, where there was congressional hearings about what was going on. And I actually, not only did I go to the University of Colorado during that time, but I also testified in front of Congress about that whole dynamic in Colorado. I spoke to the lacrosse team at Duke. That was that very high profile case, and spoke to that team.
How did that go? Just remember it? What was the
I do.
Go right into the Lion's Den. What happens?
I also went into the Lion's Den. In fact, I write about this in my book about University of Nebraska. It was Jackson, Byron Hurt, Richard Lapchick, and myself. The four of us went to Nebraska in the midst of some very, very high-profile events at the University of Nebraska at the time. That was, again, national news. And it was, in every one of those moments, there are individuals within a team who do something, and then the team or the institution gets painted with that broad brush. And to your point, the individual very often who did the act that now we have to go talk about is gone. And so you have this room full of men sitting there going, I didn't do this. Why do I have to sit through this? And I get that. But once again, I would approach it as, here's a moment for us to learn. Here's a moment for us to make sure it doesn't happen again. Here's a moment for us to talk about why it happened, how it happened. And so what I found in that process, I'll never forget when we went to Nebraska, Jackson, Byron, and I, Nebraska at the time had what they called walk-ons, and they had a lot of walk-ons. So they had a couple hundred kids, on their football team, 90 of which were part of the team, but then you had all these other student athletes who were part of it. And so we split the team up. Jackson took a third, Byron took a third, I took a third, and we were supposed to go for about 45 minutes in this breakout. My group went for an hour and a half. And I had a coach knock on the door and say, Don, you got to let them go. I said, I let them go 40 minutes ago. These guys wanted to talk. And then the next day, we went out to the practice field because we were going to do more sessions. And players were literally coming off the field talking to us because they wanted the space to talk about it. These are kids who weren't they weren't the perpetrators. And they would go home and hear from their parents or their mom or their friends at home going, hey, what's going on in Nebraska? Like, what's going on at Duke? What's going on with your team? And they didn't know, and they didn't know how to talk about it. And so, in some cases, it requires some grace to be able to talk to people who found themselves in the midst of issues and moments that they didn't understand themselves. And that's where I found really the inspiration to broaden the conversation, because I didn't come to this work because something happened to me. I didn't come to this work because, I was asked. I learned about it. I was like, wow, this is really, really critical.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a unique opportunity to have a voice in this work. And so I was thirsty for it, but there are a lot of people who just are blindly walking through the world, not realizing that they're contributing to the problem with their silence. And so my job was to kind of shake that up a little bit.
And I guess that takes me to, as we get at this part, I feel like I've been most places I want to go. Maybe there's a couple more on the bucket list to speak. But now I get more impatient. Like, there's still so many, like, how do we go bigger and deeper? And because the system is built to sustain itself.
Right.
It's lucrative, and meaning like the system of power and control and what we can get away with, and not wanting to dig deep. And anyone who does seems to lose power, right? Like if you think about how are we going to affect more change, like it take back the night I was thinking. So Don, I don't know if you knew this. Maybe our listeners do, but I was thinking, you don't see the headline that says therapy session changes corporate culture.
Right.
And while I love RAIN, and the hotline was such a great idea. But I was like, that hotline, what about so we made a legal hotline to get survivors in touch with lawyers who could listen and see if there's merit to a lawsuit. Now, I myself never sued anybody. And the reason, maybe if you want to know, I don't know if I've even told anyone on the podcast, but I just thought my perpetrator is very wealthy and he'll think he paid for it. Like, he'll be like, check, all done, guilt-free. I paid her off. I'm like, I don't want your money. And I didn't even really, I think it was a sense of, I don't even want the money to give to someone else. Like, because the cornerstone of being raped is taking your whole self and control and body, and I no part of me wanted to be had, and everything I wanted to do, I wanted to be fully my choice and my way. I don't even take grants. Like, I don't want to be, even take back the night. We don't even, like, I hate being beholden to anyone to do the work we do. And that's like me in the Greyhound bus. Like, it was just like, if I can't figure it out. So I guess what I was saying is we created a hotline a free hotline to get lawyers involved, because, like 1 billion, 180 million against this school, or, the lawsuits get attention. And at least it's a larger form of accountability, a larger meaning more entities at one time. And you and I have spent a lot of time, I won't say that speaking to 2,000 or 5,000 people in an auditorium isn't a lot of people. I don't know your largest audience. I remember 250,000, but then it was like, there's like 8,000 people, there are people out there. But they're still like, it's just this many, and are they the future? Are they the ones at Harvard? Should I go to Harvard more often because they're going to control more stuff in 10 years? Is that a big assumption? Okay, if you go to community college, you're not going to amount to enough power and control in your life. I as I get older, that's where I go back to impatient. And I wonder where you are with that. We can write a book, we can stand on the stage, we can saying the same thing, but cracking the code of privilege and power is just, it seems daunting.
It is, and I think this goes back to something that we talked about earlier. I think it's really important for us in the field to come together more, to collaborate more, There's strength in our unity. There's strength in the unity of voices and experiences. And I do think that we're at a moment where, unfortunately, in our culture, where people are picking sides so often, and that sort of division keeps us from having unified voices and being able to crack through different environments where we previously weren't having much voice. I do think that, the one thing that I will say about being in this work for so long is that there are a lot of amazing people out there working really, really hard.
I totally agree.
And I know that one of the first sort of realizations of or a name that I gave the people who I was able to meet, I call them angels and warriors. There's so many angels who are just there at a moment, at a time that is the right person for someone to hear or someone to reach out to. And the warrior piece is because we do this work when society is otherwise indifferent to it, and not, putting you out there and saying, this is the message that we need to all hear today, right now, for the future of our children and our culture and our society. And so I am humbled by the people that I've met, not just in big organizations who are doing work, but people in small towns and people who are just the practitioners who are just toiling away in obscurity, but they're there. They're there at 2 a.m, at 3 a.m. They're there for survivors. They're there to hold truth to power and hold people to account, and to be angels for those who need it.
What about this question then? Accountability. Another thing I do a lot, John, is I do all these small acts of accountability. Meaning, one time when I was starting out on the planes, I used to try really hard to look old. I would wear little nice suits and awful high heels, uncomfortable shoes. And then it was blue. So some men would sometimes think I was a flight attendant. And I'd be like, no, sir. I think I would say stuff like, if you can't get your suitcase up over your seat, maybe you need to do some more workouts. Maybe it's just not working for you to get the muscle mass you need. And then I sit right down next to him for the next 2.5 hours. One time I patted one of the principals. He was 6'3", Dawn. After my speech, I was still in college. I remember it was an earlier one because I looked like a high school kid. And he came up and he did you did such a nice job up there with our students. And so, I stood on my little tippy toes and I reached I said, you must be so proud of yourself. Your kids were so well behaved. You're such a good principal. Because I get to leave.
Right. Right.
I would do it all. I do that to even now. I'm so annoying. But I guess that's where I had is we can do all these little tiny things, but I'm just curious, in your world, you play with some bigger boys, and I'm wondering you have another hat and you're still in football world around, very powerful men who have control to some extent, or can at least say something, right? If there's enough people saying why do we do that anymore? That, why are we still doing that? We did that 25 years ago. Are we better? Are we more evolved? Are we more caring? Are we more I don't know what the word choices would be, but do you take those little chances? The problem is I get to leave the principal, but you get to you're still around the boys. You know what I mean? I think it's very different when I do something than when you do.
Right.
You have more repercussions.
I've had a few moments where in the moment you have to make a decision of whether or not you're going to stand on principle,
right,
or just walk away in silence. I have yet to walk away in silence. It's just because I know I can't live with myself if I walk away and not.
What do you think? What is it about you that thinks that? That's so cool, Don. Like, but why do you think you can't live with yourself? What's so deep in there that that's how you're wired?
It could be a little bit of, my mother's father, who passed away when I was 3.
Mm.
So it tells you how, I didn't know him very well. I didn't know him at all. He knew me.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently my mother's father was a very kind man, never said a bad word about a child, but called me a wise guy.
Mm.
So maybe it's that. Maybe
Okay.
it's just that there's a little bit of the wise guy in me. And I never, the other thing is, and I think this is the part about masculinity that I'm adamant about, is I don't want anyone doing anything in my name.
Mm.
And so when I talked about being a leader on my football team in college and other times, and one of my teammates was just talking about this recently, is that I never wanted to. Once told my coach, I will lead this team, but I don't want to be followed. In other words, I've got my life, and I'm not representing y'all's life, and I don't want you representing mine. And so I was very adamant about not letting anyone speak for me and represent my voice. And that was always very important to me from the time I was a kid. And I guess that's maybe the byproduct of being the youngest of 5, and I'm supposed to go along with, the family creed, and I very often did not. But I remember being in one space where it was really dicey. I was about to testify before Congress, and I was in the back chambers. I love Washington. I love I used to, what it used to be. And I was in the back chambers.
What? Say that again. What?
Washington, D.C. The politics of.
Okay,
Yeah.
the pomp and circumstance.
Yes, all of it. And I got invited into the back chamber before a hearing, and I was in there with all these senators, a couple senators and folks, and there was one, I'm not going to say who it was, but he was a very famous former football coach who is now a member of Congress, and he tried to disparage an organization that was holding higher ed athletics and higher ed accountable, a thing called the Knight Commission. And he made a point about the Knight Commission. He says, well, they really don't know what they're doing, and blah, blah, blah. And he kind of tried to, and then he turned and he said, isn't that right, Don?
Ooh.
And it was like the hair on the back of my neck, stood up immediately. And I turned and I looked and I made sure that I said it loud enough for anyone within the earshot of what he said to hear me say, oh, quite the contrary. I think the Knight Commission doesn't have a loud enough voice in athletics and higher ed, because they are talking about things that are affecting people and no one's talking about. And I kind of just did a 180. And I knew at that moment that maybe perhaps I lost an ally, but I lost a friend perhaps. But the opposite would have been more devastating for me, was to go along with something that I didn't believe in.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I'm glad that you're wired that way, John. There's not enough of it, honestly. Yeah, I feel like it's hard. It's just so great. I don't know. I love talking to someone I've never talked to. But yeah, we've just been running around the planet trying to figure out how to make more change. So, I guess I thought about the other thing I wondered is, it sounds like you had a really good support system. It doesn't sound like you necessarily needed it. But did you ever feel backlash? Did anyone say, like, I'll give you an example. The backlash for me was all different weird ways, but one was a women's center director who said, we're not bringing the Barbie doll of date rape into our school. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm like too perfect or too whatever. And I'm like, should I mess up my hair and wear like, what do you want me to be? I'm just me. And I even make other things I've never talked about, but I think, and maybe this would resonate with you, but I don't mind going around to every school, but there were adaptations that I would consistently make. Like, my hair is always like this. It is always pulled off my face, and it's always pulled back, and there's always red lipstick, and that's the only makeup. And there's no skirts, like long sleeves. It's like a uniform to be heard. And I
Right.
want people to listen to my red mouth and not care what hair or makeup I have on or how cute my wardrobe is. It's just got to be the voice.
Right.
And so, and even then, it's still all the packaging, and I'm not going to change the skin I'm in, but, I'm honest about it. And I guess you still could have the similar issues. Like you come in with the package you're in and all the assumptions around it and what, so was there backlash kind of that point to the skin you're in?
Hmm.
And at any point that you felt like, oh, how am I going to relate? How am I going to, and to the people with the power too, right? Not just the student audiences. I'm talking about the people, the gatekeepers to do our work.
Right. Maybe.
Maybe.
I'm a New Yorker, and so there's a bit of a I'll use the word arrogance to you brought me here, and I'm scared to death, so I'm gonna present as someone who is scared to death. And what I mean by that is that I know that what I'm saying is not a casual issue. It's not a casual conversation, and it is a life and death conversation. And so I take it with that kind of sort of sober approach. And I know that I hope that what I say matters to people and helps people. I know that what I'm saying is coming from a place of truth and a place of honesty from my point of view. And after that, I remember in the early days, a friend used to always ask me, how did it go? And I'm like, I don't know. I dropped it and I left, or I dropped it and I'm going back. And we're going to continue that conversation. And there are seeds that have been planted, but how people hear it, I can't. I don't say I can't worry about that, but to your point about the people who were in charge, I would always check in with them beforehand. What do you want me to leave with your people? What do you want them to leave with? And so I make sure I do that. And if I leave and people are comfortable, then I have not done my job. I need people to be a little bit like, wow, that part really got me. It's funny because I just saw a football coach who's now doing broadcasting, and I've had several times I've had a coach in the room, and they thought that I was talking to their student athletes, and they realized halfway through that I was talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
And,
I love that.
I had one coach who literally one guy drove me to the train station afterwards. He goes, "Can we talk?" I'm like, "Sure." And he said, "You called me out several times today." And he said it was uncomfortable because you called out things that I do with my team, and my teammate and my players were giving him the side eye, like, he's talking about you, coach. You did this today.
Nice.
And that coach drove me to the airport. I mean, to the train station.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to process some things that he knew he was doing.
That's so good.
And so, yeah. And another guy I just saw on TV, and I remember him coming up to me afterwards, and he said, I always thought you were talking about this, and you did this one thing. And he said, and I saw my daughter.
Oh.
And he was another one who, all of a sudden the light went on halfway through that I was talking about him.
Yeah, I think to your point there, first of all, thank you for doing those little things, those little nudges. Yeah. They're so good. I loved it. I did one of those at Collegiate in New York City at the boys' school. I quoted, they didn't know I was a speaker, and I walked past some of the boys sitting on a park bench. Yes. And they said there's some untapped girls over at Spence, was their language. So I rattled off, I paused on my story and rattled off a whole bunch of problematic things I've overheard along the way and slipped that one right in the middle. Yes. You gotta love that. So I guess for our listeners, Dawn and I, it takes a long time to be this confident at public speaking. It really does. What I love is, Don, there's so few people out there who are so confident in any environment as a public speaker, and I think it's a testimony to all that work you did and all the work you do and you continue to do, and be humble about it. And it's like shining right through here. I'm so happy. I'm so happy.
There's a part of it that, and I've been very honest with myself about that ability. People always say, "Oh, public speaking is like the most fearful thing that people do," right? I am more comfortable. Put me in a room with no script, no nothing. Just go. There's 800 people in that room. Go talk to them. I have no problem with that. Now, I will die 1,000 deaths before I walk on stage. I will want to throw up. I will want to turn around and run. But once I get past the first 10 minutes, I am more comfortable in that room on stage than I am in one-on-one or a small group setting. And the reason why is because I'm in control and of that moment. Like, I've got eyes on me. I can take this audience in a lot of different directions. And I know where I want to take them.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a feeling of control. Of the narrative of the conversation. If you're in a conversation with 5 people, the loudest voice might get their point across, right? In a group of 5 or 10 people. But if in a group of 1,000 and I'm the only one with a microphone, I got it, right? And so you're gonna walk away knowing what I think.
Mm-hmm.
And there's kind of a it's definitely ego. I'm not above saying that there's not some ego attached to it where I would never forget speaking at the Naval Academy, and it was the entire Naval Academy in the gym. So
in the basketball arena.
In the basketball arena.
I know.
And when you finish, they all have to stand up before you leave the stage, which I didn't know at the time. And I had finished, and I had at one point I threw a marker over there. I had a magazine that I threw over there. So I had stuff all over the stage that I had to go collect. And they're all stand up, and I'm like scurrying around stage trying to pick up my stuff. And all of a sudden, all the confidence that I had, walking off the stage, with the mic drop moment, turned into like a Marx Brothers routine where I was scurrying around the stage picking up contraband.
Awesome. Well, I hope our listeners got just a ton of stuff. And the only last point I think that struck me as we were talking is, when you talked about losing your identity, part of the bigger sense of myself is when we think about power and control and loss of control and power, it comes back to what is the identity we have. And when we're unclear on that and we grasp at others for that power instead of find internally ways to have an identity that brings us a sense of power, is the frailty. And I get worried that we're not headed in a identity. We're headed in I think a really complicated direction right now. The question of who I am is something that everyone's struggling with, and so identity is really all over the place. But getting more confidence, I think, is maybe something all of us can talk about. The movers and shakers. And I guess for my listeners, my gosh, there's nothing. Don had a few kind of cool degrees and accomplishments that we started out with that. But I just want to reassert that, at least know I'm 18 with no degrees and no parent support and no money. and here I am doing the work. So it doesn't take anything except your conviction and belief and stamina to make a change in the world. And even if it's like a pat on the shoulder, like Don just throwing some curveballs in there, take the opportunity to do the right thing and always take really good care of yourself. Be strong in yourself. Don, what do you want to leave our listeners with? A lot of them are survivors.
Yeah. And you just said something that reminded me of advice that I got from a friend of mine who is not in the work, and he's sort of he calls me a contrarian because I'm always disagreeing with him, and we've been lifelong friends. And we were talking about whatever the issue was, and I was ranting and going, and he said, you're on a jet ski, and society's more like a big cruise ship. He said, you want to change directions really fast. Society doesn't move that fast. And he was saying it to annoy me, but it was the truth. And this was probably 20 plus years ago. And I took it to heart, because he was right. I wanted change to happen, and I could see the truth, or I could see the issue and say, this is the way it should be. And I could stand firm in that because I believed it and I saw it and I knew it to be true. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to move the way I want them to move, the way we want them to move. There's a devastatingly sad truth to that. And to be in the work, you have to accept that some days, I remember doing work in Boston when I was living in Boston about the conversation turned to gun violence and whatever else. And it was a frustrating meeting that I was in about change needs to happen. I remember going home and I turned the news on, and it was a story about, a boy that, shot his friend because he had a gun. And I just sat there and I just cried. And I like we can't change this thing that is so obvious that change needs to happen. And at that point, you just have to decide that I'm in this forever. And we're just going to keep on working. And sometimes when you think you're never going to see the change in your lifetime, it's a devastating thought. It's a hard thought. But at the same time, that means that we just keep going and keep pushing. And as I said a little while ago, you cling to the people. So when I saw your name on my email come through for this, you cling to the people who are in it for the long haul, who are dedicated to the work, who are dedicated to everything that's good about who we are as people. And so when I saw your name, I was like, all right, Katie, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And we'll find it in whatever. And so that's what you cling to.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess, just keep journaling, listeners. Just take it all down. It's not a once and done. I mean, I think what Don's clearly said is it's an ongoing self-examination and, saying this is hard. And it's okay that it's hard. It's actually great. It's great that it's hard. It means it's working. So anyway, Don, just a pleasure and a delight to have you on the show and talking about everything. And for our listeners, just continue with that self-care and journey along. And every single guest I'm certain, got something to share that's going to be useful. And listen to it again a year later and see if you've grown and there's something new you hear. You never know how change might percolate, and you'll find something new. So take care. Together we are definitely thriving and surviving.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Dear Katie. These conversations are never easy, but they're always necessary, and we're so grateful you chose to share this space with us. If something in today's episode stirred something within you, please give yourself what you need. Whether that's rest, support, or just a deep breath, you're not alone. To hear more stories, resources, and survivor-centered conversations, be sure to subscribe and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. We want to hear from you, so please leave us a review and share your feedback. Your thoughts help us create episodes that resonate with listeners. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.